what the question that I'm asking is the power of people, is the power of our enthusiasm, is our power to work harder more powerful than the dollar? And so I think this video looking at this makes me think about that we have to become what I have said and continue to say, we have to become the Davids in this moment, that we may not have the resources that they have, but we have the stamina and we have the ability to work harder through our collective power. And that's what this means to me today.
Our lunch. Badass women getting things done.
I'm putting my armor on, man, because that is just got me all pumped up. So when I was cutting that song and putting it together, yeah, it feels pretty powerful. And that's what I want to feel like today.
Yeah, it just could not be more perfect. And I'll tell you what I think about. So I'm thinking about the Supreme Court decisions
Yes, me too.
that happened this week, and one of them which gives groups the ability to just pour in as much money as they can. And so what the question that I'm asking is the power of people, is the power of our enthusiasm, is our power to work harder more powerful than the dollar? And so I think this video looking at this makes me think about that we have to become what I have said and continue to say, we have to become the Davids in this moment, that we may not have the resources that they have, but we have the stamina and we have the ability to work harder through our collective power. And that's what this means to me today.
Yeah, when I saw that couple climb up the Empire State Building, I thought crazy. And then when they unfurled that banner that said, the power of love, when it's greater than the power and the greed and the money and the corruption that we see in this administration, right? As we go in celebrating the 250-year history of our country, it feels strange for many of us, but it shouldn't, because we are fighting for it. And like early day patriots, it's what we are trying to sort of bring out of the darkness right now. And when the corruption is so great and it's out in broad daylight, and you have to climb to the top of the Empire State Building to do that. And what cut the news was maybe not the story. I was like, okay. And I mean, they kissed, they got engaged and all that. They got arrested. Now they have felony counts against them. But I was just like, that was powerful, courageous. And I think that's what we need to do. Not maybe climb to the top of the empire, but something close to it.
So let me tell you what else I was thinking. I was driving this morning and the radio was on, and in the news it said that this is the most traveled 4th of July in 15 years. So more people are traveling this July 4th, more than 15
Wow.
years. And what I kept thinking about is, okay, so we're in a state where democracy is just hanging by a thread.
Right.
It's the biggest grift in history. We're in a war. We have trillions of dollars taken out of Medicaid and Medicare. 500 nursing homes could close, 300 hospitals. Billionaires are paying less taxes. And I kept thinking, wow. So in our opportunity to say, "Well, never let a crisis go to waste," I'm thinking, okay, so the next big holiday is going to be Labor Day, I think, or something.
Right.
So the question will be, when we have that many people traveling, what is our opportunity to message? What is our opportunity to be a voice or be there where people can actually see and feel that, yeah, you can be joyous in all of these things, but there is probably something that we can do in that moment. We might have missed this one because I kept thinking, my goodness, what on the earth could we have done? What kind of things could we have on the plane so that there's a message that comes through that just sort of causes them to pause for a minute and recognize
Yeah.
that in their ability, this is what freedom looks like, and what you have to do to keep it.
Yeah, I'm loving seeing people come in the room, seeing some old friends enter, and great for people to be here. I agree. And I was thinking this missed opportunity around this time. I think because a lot of people felt, I don't know if it's the heat or whatever, visibility, but we're talking about visibility, bridges will be up. But I agree that we should have really, and some people are
Yeah.
owning this time to stand up and do the Declaration of Independence. I know some people have a woman's version. Frida had been sending that around, which I thought was great. And I think that this is the time. And Heather Cox Richardson, if you were watching her today, was reading the whole thing. And as I was working, I was listening, going, wow, these early founders, their words about the king, and they, 250 years ago, just writing up this document really against the British monarchy. There were other reasons why they kind of inspired why they wanted to do the revolution, but it was really this idea that not the divine right of a king, but of the people. And if you read in the Federalist Papers, 69 in Hamilton, we were definitely, that's where we're going. And how we got here to get, with all that said, damn if we don't have a king, and damn if you don't have the Supreme Court making that happen, the immunity that they gave him and the power in these last rulings talking about the Supreme Court. We had a few things, at least the mail-in voting was protected. And then, they doubled down wanting to do more of the SAVE Act. We see that kind of pressure going on. Very narrow on the birthright citizenship. It shouldn't have been narrow. This is crazy.
No.
So we have a Supreme Court that understands the papers and foundings of our country, upsetting the branches of power, and the Congress has pretty much given up their right and what they're supposed to be doing, because they're just like now a clown show. They're not really doing anything. So I think it's up to us, as we get into this fight, and especially in our conversation today, what we also have to pay attention to is the unraveling of kind of our place in history and erasing us. We've talked about this on the show, so.
Yeah, I think, when I think about, what can we do uh, for 4th of July, so I'm thinking
Right.
my family will probably have some kind of fit when I tell them what I'm thinking. But the other thing is, I had suggested that people what a slave is to 4th of July. That's Frederick Douglass,
Yeah.
that's my boyfriend. So I always have to make sure that people are reading what his words are. But I don't know. It was maybe it was Maureen Dooley, or it could have been this other group. And what they
Right.
would do is they would go when people were having picnics and cookouts. They would drive, and wherever there was one happening, they'd stop and just sort of go bust into it and chat in and say, "Hey, how you doing?" Blah blah blah. So that might be a really good thing to do on 4th of July, is whenever there's cookouts and stuff going on, is just to sort of
Show
stop
up.
in and say, "Oh, we just want to welcome you for the 4th of July. So happy. Here's a couple of cards for you to pass out to your family. I hope you guys have a wonderful holiday." So
Yeah.
I might think about that, and then that might be something to make me feel better on the 4th of July.
Yeah, maybe blow some fireworks up, make some good
Yeah.
trouble. And I think it's a really good time when we talk about conversations, having a conversation about our country's founding. And when I see people nowadays, I think when you see these MAGA conversations online, it's almost like they never read any of the Constitution. And this is why today I'm really excited to get this show started, because talking about women's studies is where I found my groove. When I went to college and I walked into a class and history class, learning about history, I realized that we didn't know a lot of our history. I was at book club last night and we wrote a Madam Secretary about Frances Perkins, and I would say 80% of the people there never heard of her, or very briefly heard about her, but didn't understand that she actually was the mother of Social Security, was actually the architect of the New Deal, and we don't know her. It's sort of like, Rosalind Franklin, anybody here? The DNA, the helix of that. Like when I went to class, I was like, son of a bitch, no one told me this stuff, but it empowered me, And I was like, such an important way that we looked at history. And then they included gender later. And of course, there was the expansion into, what Black studies was happening then too. And it was just so amazing. So I'm just so excited that the fight isn't over and we have women guarding those rights and that history and democracy today. So if you're in the room, you're in the right place to get out of the heat, because we're going to spark stuff up today. It's July 3rd, one day before the big celebration. Hopefully you're going to do your barbecues inside today. But you're on the Friday Power Lunch Live, and we are bringing your host, Catherine White.
Vanell Norton.
That's right. And we are bringing you the voice of the grassroots across Virginia, across the nation today. Rules of the road. If you're in the room and you're new, hello, hello, hello. Use the chat. Really spread the news. What are you doing for 4th of July? What are you making? What's your favorite dish? Macaroni or something yummy? I'm not sure. Maybe getting a hot dog, but let
Hot
us
dogs.
know. Right? Hot dog. Let us know. But if you're nasty, we'll kick your butt out. Support the show. Thank you to our patrons today in the room. Thank you. You get a special background, and you always get the first look at the show during the week. So join us. We need this support. I would hope we get for the 4th of July, the spirit of that, some support today to become a patron. Thank you. And make sure you follow us on Substack, because then you get our stuff. And we need you to get that announcement, because Fennell went live last night on the road with Lonely Thorn and Michelle Hornish. So that was awesome. And on Sundays, join us at 7 p.m. for our Sunday sit down. We're always talking about something cool, but today we're talking about 3 powerful women that really are standing guard over our rights. Because freedom isn't self-executing. We really got to stand guard, and we got to be part of it. So welcome Jessica Berg in the room, educator, curriculum writer, founder of the Phoenix Project and the Rise Summit, and also Dr. Bonnie Stabile is here, associate professor, George Mason University, founder of the Gender and Policy Center. Welcome to Bonnie. She's just awesome, awesome, awesome. Corey Amron, I'm so glad to have her back. Women Lawyers on Guard, and she's going to talk about her Democracy Accelerator project, which I think sounds really cool, and I think we should have a whole movie around that accelerator project. So I'm pretty excited. So we will get the show started, and I will see you in a bit, friend.
All right.
All right, Women's Studies, Power Unite. Wonder Women, let's go. Let's bring up some Wonder Women today. I'm so excited to get this started. I already went in. Hello, Bonnie, welcome. I want to give you guys a proper introduction. So as we celebrate today, Independence Day, and also bring up Jessica, please, we're asking a different question. Who gets to decide what America teaches? Women and gender studies programs are increasingly under political pressure as universities close and they consolidate or reduce programs, while broader debates continue over DEI, the curriculum, and academic freedom. And today we are going to discuss with these wonderful Wonder Women what is at stake for women's history, public policy, and democracy in the next generation. Very important. Jessica Berg, that's your heart. You're a Virginia educator, curriculum writer, founder of the Miss Phoenix organization, creator of the Women and Gender Studies curriculum, founder of the Rise to Summit, and advocate for civic education. We're so pleased to have you. And Dr. Bonnie Stabile, associate professor at George Mason University, founder of the Gender and Policy Center, public policy scholar, and author of Women, Power, and Rape Culture. Thank you so much for being here. Let's give them a big round of applause on this hot day. How are you ladies feeling today?
Great. Thank you for having us.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. Yeah, look, the room is lighting up. I think it's about time we really focus on this conversation. So I wanted to open that up today and say, okay, we see this today where so many things we're focusing on. But Bonnie, why don't you get the setup about what is women's studies and where did this come from?
So I think what you were talking about in the preamble here about how people are not aware of women's history and women's role in founding the nation and their leadership positions, that's really important. So I think we're both coming at this from the perspective of there's 2 critical components that we need people to know about women's leadership and to use education to develop women's leadership. But we also need civic education. People don't seem to know what their rights are, what the Constitution is. We seem to be at a loss for that. So I think that's what's at stake, that civic education writ large has diminished over the years. And then with the role of we were in the upswing, kind of understanding women's roles. And now there's been, executive orders and state policies and attempted federal policies that are putting the kibosh on even talking about women and previously underrepresented groups, right? So we've really lost a lot of standing there. But I guess I want to interject because there is a lot of dire news. But before we do that, can I say like some good news?
Well, why not? Let's have a good news. Yes.
So the good news is I'm a professor, as you noticed, at George Mason University, and George Mason actually, I think, is a relative success story, relative to what people are facing across the nation. So Gregory Washington, our president, though he had been our universities being sued for all these things for his anti-racist agenda, but he did not capitulate as many other universities did, and he was just his contract was just extended for 5 years. Well, for 4 years, of course, right? So his leadership, and holding steady, and he had to do a lot of machinations to satisfy everyone, but nonetheless, I teach in the public policy school, Schar School of Public Policy and Government. And my center is the Gender and Policy Center. So we're really focused on policy mechanisms. Women's studies is a separate line of inquiry, right? But I
Right.
will say that both my center, which will be 10 years old next year, and our Women in Gender Studies major and center have not been adversely impacted in the current political moment, at least not overtly, and maybe yet, right? We
Right.
can talk later about what's happening
About
around
that.
the
Right.
country.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm in a lot of networks that, so I have a lot of news from the front lines, if you will. But I can say that from where we stand at the largest public university in Virginia, we still have a thriving women and gender studies program, and we still have my Gender and Policy Center. And of course, that's right at the crux of studying and being affected by federal and state and local policy.
Right.
And that's really, those are the critical mechanisms.
Yeah, I know for me, and I don't know what your journey was when I went to college back in the 80s. And like I said, when I took the classes, I was just so inspired by what I learned. And I think it shaped me so many ways. And so, Jessica, when I think about you as a teacher, and you obviously working with young women and seeing that spark must be amazing. But tell me a little bit about your journey and how you got there. And then you let people know to set this discussion up, like how you developed this curriculum at the school, and then obviously what's happening now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a high school teacher, English first, and then when I wrote and created the Women and Gender Studies program, similar to many people's experiences, it wasn't until I was at college at UVA and took my first Women and Gender Studies course and finally had the women, the words, the history, the movement behind this thing I had always felt, and it was so empowering, eye-opening. And when I started teaching high school, I wanted to bring that down, to my high school students. And so it started with the Ms. Phoenix organization. And then after the 2016 election, so many of my young women and students and young men as well, they didn't quite understand like how regardless of politics did the more qualified candidate not win. And I was like, well, this is going to take me longer to explain than our
Right.
bi-monthly meetings. And so the wheels were turning, and I was like, why isn't there a course? If we think of
Right.
English, history, math, all these core subjects leading to what you take in college and eventually go on to major in and do, like, why isn't this available at the high school level? And so then that's when I started the journey to do that, to bring this type of course and curriculum, which really didn't exist, down to the high school level. And I'll kind of piggyback off of Bonnie's. I teach in Loudoun County, which is always kind of this epicenter for a lot of educational and cultural war battles. But our superintendent right now, Dr. Spence, in similar vein to the President George Mason, has been,
Very supportive.
yes, very supportive, has not capitulated, is supportive of what I do. And the biggest thing I always reinforce in a lot of these discussions around education, especially public school education, I wrote and created the course. I got it all the right signatures on all the right forms. But if there was no student interest to take it, it wouldn't exist.
Right. Hmm.
But there is. There is a vast amount of, and I'll be headed into my 8th year teaching it. It's spread to other high schools in Loudoun County.
That's awesome.
My goal is to spread it
Right.
beyond and
Mhm.
to really be proactive in, this type of education, because as so many of the things we were talking about, learning about your own history is so important because of this adage, you can't be what you can't see. And like you mentioned, Rosalind Franklin and so many of these
Yeah.
women that like are there but have been either ignored or
Right.
actively erased. And I always tell my students, something's important when the proverbial they is trying to take it away. Your right to vote, your access to the ballot box, your voice, your education, what you can learn, what you have
Right.
access to, the books and stuff like that. And so that's really my goal with the course. And it has been, I've had so many students go
Right.
on to
Do
take
other things.
women
Right.
and gender studies in college. Yeah.
Well, with that said, when I think about how it's so important to study. I mean, when I know that searching for women in books and history and science and medicine, economics, leadership, it's out there. And even last night in the discussion where we're reading a book about Frances Perkins, people were like, "I don't know who this is," and you have to ask yourself, and they're like, "Well, why didn't we know?" And I had to chuckle about that because one lady said, "Well, I'm not really a feminist." And then I said, well, there's this thing called patriarchy. So maybe you need to join up with this word because if you want to know why it isn't in the history books. But with that said, where are we at now? And for both of you to answer this is when you think that it's actually, we are now the target, right? What happens when the study of women becomes the target? So now that's where we're at in this administration, where they're using education and funding, which is very powerful. Like you may have supportive people, but what happens when this particular bill that went in front of Congress recently, and one of the Democrats signed on that ties it to funding. And when you see what's happening to the programs now, Bonnie, could you address that first? Like now, where are we seeing the attacks? What do they look like? And what is the impact? What to programs that we see maybe are shuttering?
So in some states, I'm in a few networks. One is the Center
Mhm.
for American Women in Politics, and one is the National Women's Studies Association, and also the
Right.
National Women's Law Center. And they're all kind of having gatherings now to talk about these things. But what I would say is, in certain states like Florida and Texas and Ohio, you see programs, women's studies programs closing. Michigan. Having to change their names. And this is all after the DEI, anti-DEI
Executive order.
executive order from the president, but also state level initiatives that even some of those predated that executive order. And what you see happening is people really don't know how to implement it. That's why it's such an interesting study of policy, right? Because what happened within days or weeks of the DEI executive order was that people didn't know what to do at the National Cryptologic Museum. They actually took brown paper and put it over women and black people's pictures. They speaking of complete erasure, right? And so as Jessica was saying, if there were no market for our classes, then that would be another thing. But the National Women's Studies Association did a study that showed even in the face, since so many programs, national women's studies programs around the country have been shuttered, there's higher student interest in the classes. So you'll see that there's a generational disjuncture for one thing.
Mhm.
And then to speak to your points that, well, why don't people know? I mean, I know who Frances Perkins is because I went to Mount Holyoke College where Frances
Okay,
Perkins
we know.
went.
Right.
So she's like one of our most touted alums. But what I also know from having that women focused education produces more women in power. And so kneecapping that is a way to hamper that success. So I know as a graduate of a women's college that at very high numbers, women who have had women focused education occupy the, highest levels of leadership positions. And so that's definitely something that they're trying to
So the impacts are happening in real. There's a
they're
lot shuttering
happening.
across the country. And then, like you said, that stops the pipeline. So that sounds interesting. I'll go to Jessica real quick. So, Jessica, when you have your thoughts on this, even at that level, the academic level, you're teaching your students to think critically. And it feels like a disjointed thing because in some states, obviously, kids aren't getting any of this education at all, right? It's like strange that we'll have this society of just like a lopsidedness of it. But what does that look like in the classroom when you see when you see these attacks and fights? It's become a political point, not just around women's studies and gender, but just larger arena that you've been actually targeted those attacks in the classroom. What does that do to you as a teacher, to the students, to the actual practice of education?
Yeah. So the thing about public education, we are beholden to the state curriculum, and
Right.
a lot of that is determined by your standardized tests. And to answer your question as well about like why don't we know about these women, the National Women's History Museum did a study in 2017 of all K through 12 history curriculum in the United States. and looked at like who is named in our history books and who
Right.
is not. And it was one woman for every three men. And then they broke it down by race and who these women are. And so when you think of that across the entirety of the United States, we are not learning about women and have to teach to a certain extent to this
Right.
curriculum. And as an English teacher, I did my own kind of sample of this. And that's the same with the books that we're, allocated by our curriculum to teach. So few, it was less than in Loudoun County, less than 30% were books by women, far fewer by women of color and members of the LGBTQIA community. So you're just not learning this. And then the bigger thing is when, we have initiatives like DEI to get more diverse authors, then this at the, K through 12 level is when you have this extremely vocal opposition from, the Moms for Liberties groups
Right.
and what it does to teachers in public education is they start to self-center and teach from a place of fear because it's a
Right.
lot. It is a lot to take on that ire. And, a lot of times we know more parents in our communities are supportive, especially of what I do. But I mean, these people, will shoot off emails. They've doxed me
Right.
and
Hmm.
and that makes it difficult. I mean, like I'm fine. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. But other teachers, it does create that
It
fear and
creates
like,
a problem.
am I really going to approach this particular subject matter knowing that this backlash, could come at me? And so you start to self-censor and that
Right.
is its own form of erasure.
Yeah. And then in policy, Bonnie, your thoughts on it and a long-term look at this. I mean, like you said, it just creates this pipeline of people that become leaders. What are your kind of concerns on that level? I mean, we feel good about George Mason. That's where I got my master's, by the way. I love George Mason. I love your program. I love that you're archiving our Persisterhood project there, Robin's work on that. That's awesome. But how about just in general, the big picture about what's happening to women's history, feminist scholarship? I mean, do we have to go underground? What's the talk about what we're seeing on this level when you go into your secret star chambers to talk about this?
Well, so well at the overt explicit level, some of the things that came across the transom were if you're receiving federal funding for your research, or if you have a federal grant or contract that
Mhm.
you can't use. There was a list of 200 words that were circulated that you can't use, and
Wow.
they included representation, women, black, bias, words of that sort, which I thought, well, I'm not going to get through many classes if I can't say these words, right? So there's a chilling effect directly because there's the threat that you'll lose funding. And then, as Jessica said, a lot of people are self-censoring because they're fearful. And even before that executive order, I was aware of faculty who self-censored and kind of cleansed their own faculty profiles and the like because they just didn't want to become a
Right.
target. So there's a lot is accomplished just out of fear, but a lot is accomplished out of defunding education. And so it's both state and federal level initiatives, and some of them are quite, you know, direct attacks. So in the states, but also, so for instance, in Florida, there's the famous New College example,
Yeah.
where they just went in and literally, closed the gender studies program and just decided we're now going to have a bunch of athletes come in. But more mundanely, the people that I talk to in women and gender studies programs and people who are doing things like this new leadership program that I run in the summers, they've not been able to do their programs because it's now considered a violation of federal law to have programs that explicitly benefit one particular group, right? So if you say that if this is a program for women, you're not allowed to do that. We can say that our program is about women, so we teach about women's participation.
Got
But so there's wordsmithing that goes on, but it also is diminished, by the policies are very directly focusing on
Right.
that. And so that's at a specific level of policy, but at another level, the elimination of scientific and medical research, which has a downstream effect of supporting all kinds of initiatives at universities. Since World War II, that's really how our system has worked, that our research and development and our funding of universities largely came through federal grants and scientific, studies, and a lot of those are being eliminated now. And so I don't think people realize the extent to which universities are under assault and are really in dire straits now, and that even really hasn't come to full fruition when people also the keeping out of international students, which are also another
Big deal. Yeah.
enriching for, the culture of campuses, but also for the pocketbooks of campuses, because a big source of funding comes from scientific and medical research and the participation of the international
Yeah.
community.
It's so true. And I think it's so much is going on right now. This ripple effect is happening, in front of our eyes. And the attack in Ohio on colleges by Vivek Ramaswamy, who's running, is unbelievable because that runs a town's economy, right? I know we're at time, but I want to make sure if you can stay for the after chat, as some of you can. I think some of the audience has some really great questions going on there. But I want to end with Jessica, because when I think about young leaders, and I've been to your Rise Summit, we'll end on a little hope in action. Well, what inspires you about that next generation? Do you feel like there, as much as they're trying to erase these young women that I always saw, I don't know.
Yeah. I that is the thing I love about teaching, because whenever I get dark and cynical, it is these young people that give me the absolute
Yeah.
hope and inspiration. And both Bonnie and Catherine and so many in this room have been to the summit and see that firsthand. And they are just so on top of it. And, for all the ills of social media, I've recognized in the, 8 years of teaching women in gender studies, they come in with a certain awareness now of like, okay, Miss Berg, I know what the ERA is, but can you explain and I just kind of backfill the history. And the thing is, and this is where, I kind of want to end like a call to action. They have a voice, and we just need to point them in that direction. Like Bonnie talked about, civic education and teaching them how to advocate in all the myriad of ways, because they see what's at stake. They are completely aware, and
Right.
they have this immense power and energy to really change,
Right.
the future. And so we can be proactive and progressive in our education, because
Now, I know that I would want to make sure that what we can do, and we can address that even if you want. People are going to ask, what can we do? And just real quickly, just like Bonnie, is it just sort of endowments? What are we doing to help? I mean, what could people in the room do? Just quickly.
Well, I think we have to support women's initiatives with dollars and cents, that only 2% of all philanthropy goes to women-focused initiatives. And of course, if we're losing federal funding and state funding for
Oh,
these
yeah.
initiatives, we really need to consider supporting. And I know there's a lot of things to support out there, but it is true, even at Mason, like our center is dependent on dollars to do
Right.
our new leadership training. And I'm sure Jessica's initiative, her summit relies on,
Yep.
so all of these things
We're
rely
sponsors.
on our funds as well as our voices, and they're integrally tied
No,
together.
I appreciate that. And I'm so glad. I think today on this discussion, hello, Fina, I'm glad you're here. We're talking about freedom. This freedom requires us to really be aware and then get involved. And it really reminds me today, this conversation is more than just a celebration, but really about freedom. We have to really stay on guard. So thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, Jessica. We'll see you hopefully in the after chat if you could stay. And I'm going to hand it over to Fennell.
Thank you very much, Catherine. That really was an awesome discussion, and I think this is why we continue. So we're going to bring up Corey Amron from Women Lawyers on Guard. We've talked about all of the what's under attack, but we have to figure out what we do. So Corey Amron, she's from Women Lawyers on Guard, and she does really great work. I want people to understand it is a nonpartisan organization, which I think is important so that we understand the work that she does, and that it really is reflective of all women, no matter who you are. But we do want to talk about some important things today in terms of the way that we take this work forward. So Corey, before we get started though, with all the Supreme Court decisions that happened this week, is there anything you want to comment on before we start to talk about the Democracy Accelerator?
Well, yeah, I just want to comment on the fact that the Supreme Court needs an overhaul, let's put it that way, and because it's destroying our democracy, it's destroying women's rights. And there are many, many ways that people are talking about doing this. But I just want to plant that seed in people's minds that we don't have to take this. Our Supreme Court is not there to take away rights. Our Supreme Court is there to interpret the Constitution and bring us forward into the modern age. So I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I'm so glad you said that, Corey, and I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little more about Women Lawyers on Guard and what you do because everyone may not understand. But I'm just grateful that you made that statement about the Supreme Court because sometimes you're listening to the news or you're reading something and it does feel a little hopeless in terms of the time frames that things move along. So go ahead and just speak a little bit about Women Lawyers on Guard and then just address that for folks who might feel like, to your point, that it's hopeless.
What to do, it's not hopeless. Yeah, so I mean, originally thought I would talk about, there's many reasons to be hopeful, but no reason to be complacent. But let me elaborate a little bit on Women Lawyers on Guard and what we're doing in this space. So just as background, as you mentioned, we are a 501c3. We were formed 10 years ago in the initial throes of Trump 1 when we thought, you know what, we just need to do something. We are a nationwide organization of all genders, not just lawyers, so anybody can join. It's free. And what we determined at the time was that we were going to work on three areas: sexual harassment, women's reproductive rights, and gender and workplace equity. So we did that, and I won't go into all the things that we did over the past 10 years. You can look at our website or send me an email. But about 4.5 years ago, we were asked to co-lead an amicus brief in the Dobbs case. And this was to be an amicus brief on behalf of women legal organizations, mostly women's bar associations around the country. There's about 100 of them. And in thinking about that and the strategy for that, and of course, after they totally ignored it, it occurred to us that maybe this is something that everybody else knew and could see, but that there was this 40 plus year strategic plan to eviscerate abortion rights and then some for women. This was well before people talked about and could see Project 2025, but we knew that there was this long-term plan and that people were following it. And not only that, but we could also see that it was the same people, the same funding, the same institutions that were anti-democracy and had their long-term plan. This was just part of it. And so it occurred to us, where is the pro-democracy long-term plan? And so we started to look for that. Not that we have any particular expertise, but we had a lot of contacts. And we went from one organization to another, all the organizations that you probably have heard of, and started to talk to them about where is this plan? Who is working on this type of plan? Now, let me just also back up and say that we didn't conceive of a plan that everybody would get in a room and decide exactly what the plan would be, and then everybody would be forced to work on this plan and have a little cog in it, but rather that there would be a lot of audacious and creative thinking about where we should be going for our democracy, what can be better about our democracy, and that we would look to map that to organizations that are working on the ground with success, and see where are the areas that people are not working in. So sort of push out those gaps, push out those ideas that maybe people hadn't thought of, or they just weren't working on for whatever reason. So we started to talk to organizations about this, or who was working on a plan, any plan, very broadly defined, not just a plan about the rule of law, not just a plan about getting people to the polls, but also including things like we talked about civic education, and we talk about economic opportunity, and we talk about healthcare, all the things that people would want in order to choose to live in a democracy, rather than following some person, some autocrat who says, I can promise the world for you, just vote me in and you'll never have to vote again. Okay. So again, as we started talking to organizations about this, each one of us said, this is really great idea. We're not doing it. This is what we are doing. And they would tell us about the amazing things that they were working on in their lane. And we started to gather information about organizations and what they were working on. And then 2025 hit, and there was an explosion of organizations, ad hoc groups, associations, experts, not just working on democracy, but standing up for democracy, signing statements, things like that, trying to educate people about what authoritarianism is, et cetera, et cetera. And we kept talking to organizations, and what are you doing? And it got to be that the information that we had has thousands of pieces of information in it, and it was in a ginormous spreadsheet. We have a younger person, younger than me, very much younger than me, gathering all this information. And what was happening is, as we were talking to the next organization, they would say, hey, we're doing this particular thing in civic education. Let's say we're doing a curriculum, let's say, for high school students. And we would say, oh, did you know that this other organization is doing something, sounds very similar? Would you like to talk to them? And inevitably they would say yes, and we would put these groups together. And over time, what happened was, even these organizations we were talking to realized that it would be a lot more efficient if they could get into this information and see who else is doing what, and what are they doing that's very similar to what we are trying to do with our limited resources.
So Corey, let me just jump in for
Yeah,
a second.
sorry to rattle on and on.
No, it's okay. So I want to sort of bring to what you were saying, because it appears that there is this work going on that's really that was not for us in terms of pro democracy. And so you guys have discovered that there's work happening and you needed to do something about it. So this is what you're explaining to folks, is how this democracy accelerator has come full circle now. So we can have confidence that there is a group out there and that there is a whole lot of thinking going on, so that we can move forward and sort of, the forces that are not moving to advance democracy, that there is this group, this group of people together to advance democracy.
You cannot believe how many organizations and people and experts and universities and faith-based organizations, unions, you name it,
Mhm.
that are working pro-democracy, again, in their lane for their missions, and their, particularly now, just trying to do, let's say, trying to put the house is on fire, trying to put that fire out. But there are also organizations that are now, particularly now, working on envisioning a better democracy, a better society. So nobody can say that the society that we had, or the democracy that we had, was working for everybody. I mean, that would have been a ridiculous statement, even though I'm sure some people would want to say that. And so there is a profusion of organizations, people, experts, non-experts, people that just want to do something, that are out there doing that. The issue is, it's very fragmented and it's very separate, and people don't know that they are that they're duplicating work that other people are doing rather than building on that work. Do you know what I mean? So
Hmm. Hmm.
so that's the sort of the landscape that we've seen, and frankly, we started looking for some organization who would do this democracy accelerator idea, and of course found, well, not of course, but found that we couldn't find any. Um, and not that we talk to all thousands of these
Hmm.
folk, but we kind of have the mantra that we are the leaders that we've been looking for. I
Hmm.
mean, everybody says to me, well, where are the people who are doing this? And where are the people who are going to lead us on this and lead us on that? And we just come to the conclusion that it's got to be us. And it's not just formal organizations. We're also talking about grassroots, ad hoc groups that have just, well, we were talking about the Brit brigades the other day, and or the
Hmm.
other, before we got on here, and um, grassroots efforts that have really had an effect, but you don't see that in the media because what the media reports on, or the traditional media, so to speak, reports on, the negativity and not the positive things that have been happening. So, for instance, even Steve Miller confessed that it was the grassroots pressure that stopped them from cutting off the habeas corpus rights of the immigrants that they were throwing into concentration camps. And so we obviously have had an effect, and we need to keep doing that in real life,
So Corey, then it really is these all of these things together. We were talking earlier about people power. Can people power really be more powerful than the dollar that that people will throw into these campaigns? So before we conclude, and I don't know if you'll be able to stay for the after chat because I have a whole lot more questions. You want to just tell folks what they can do to become part of this work because it is secured as it should be. So can you just tell people how they might be able to participate or help?
Okay, so to go on our website, and I'll put the link in the chat, and look at the Democracy Accelerator. It's not for individuals unless they are part of some sort of even ad hoc group.
Hmm.
It's for organizations and organizations. This is what they told us. Okay, we went on a listening tour. They told us they wanted organization to organization. We have built this search engine, let's call it, and put that ginormous spreadsheet into a database so that the organizations themselves can search, they can find resources, they can find events. So what we need people to do is tell us about organizations, particularly those that are regional or local that are working on democracy. If you're part of an organization and you're interested, send me an email. If you want to beta test this and find out more, we have demonstrations at least twice a month. Um, if you are just don't put this on social media. That's one thing I'm going to ask you not to do,
Hmm.
because we are not putting this out to just any old folk. It's just people who are aligned. And join Women Lawyers on Guard, and you'll find out more. And of course, we're fundraising for phase 2, which is communication and collaboration securely on this platform. So get out there and show the flag, so to speak, and bring people with you out in
We can
real space.
I love
we can
that.
do that. Thank you so much, Corey. We hope
Thank
we'll see
you.
you in the after chat.
Yes, I'll be there.
Catherine, thank
I'm
you.
feeling
Catherine.
that song. I'm unstoppable. Let's bring Miss Unstoppable Robin Warner up because she's unstoppable and she's here to talk about. First of all, thank you, Corey. Great conversation.
Hmm.
Robin, feeling unstoppable. What do you want to talk about? Let's get to it.
Well, I want to talk about the Women's Summit. The Women's Summit, August 21st through 23rd, in our favorite Hilton McLean Tyson's Corner. But
Right.
we're doing some really different stuff this year at the Women's Summit. The first thing is we are finally honoring our grassroots groups, and we are inviting all the grassroots groups to come in and take a long-deserved bow because we applaud the candidates, we high-five the organizations, but what about us? We've been doing all this work. It's high time. We are honored. So Friday night at the Women's Summit, be ready to take a bow, and we're going to put the link in it. But you know what I'm really excited about?
gonna
are the
guess.
master classes
Yeah.
Saturday afternoon, which is the brainchild of Fennell Norton, because we need to think outside the box, think differently, and do things differently because we know how to get things done. And not only do we have these master classes where everybody's going to attend and think about how we can organize differently, we're then going to have activist think tanks the next day to say, let's apply these to topics that are really going to impact this election because nothing is more important than this election in November. So we're going to talk about data centers. How can we be approaching them differently? Immigration. I'm talking about, of course, the three amendments and more. But then I want to add that not only are we prepared for the Women's Summit, we're doing some really exciting pre-summit features. So let's bring Chuck Moran up here to talk about one of the things we're going to do, because we are putting together videos about memories from past women's summits. And Chuck's like, well, let's help everybody make better videos. So Chuck, talk about your workshop next week.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. I figure everybody on the call's got one of these babies somewhere nearby. So what we want to do is help you put your smartphone to good use through the power of video and video storytelling. So we're going to offer this free video creation workshop for people who have tickets from past summits or the current summit. The workshop will be next Wednesday, July 8th at 5 p.m. And I can just run through four main things that you'll be able to do after you take the workshop. First thing, you'll be able to create these memory videos that Robin's talking about that will be featured in the highlight reel at the summit. We'll also be asking you, once you've learned how to shoot video a little bit better with framing and lighting and audio, to join the summit video coverage team. So you can be a full-fledged member of our coverage team. We're going to be shooting a whole lot of video at the summit. You can also, and this was Fanal's idea, record heartfelt videos to send to family and friends with how you feel about certain things that we're all concerned about these days. And last of those four, you could become a story keeper with Rural Ground Games Storyteller Project. If you've heard about that, if you haven't, come to the workshop and you'll hear more. So I'm going to put into the chat the registration link and a link to my Substack. I ask you to go over to Substack and subscribe because you can keep up with a bunch of tips and tricks about using video in activism and organizing. And I'll also put my email address in the chat so you can get in touch with me with any questions.
I love it. And Robin, that Big Ten promo still work for a ticket? Buy a ticket, get to the video workshop.
You can, if you type in Big 10 in the promo, you'll get 10% off.
That's right.
And you heard it here first.
You heard it here, Big 10. And I'm going to say Chuck Moran is on the programming team. And Chuck, let's just say real quick what we're putting together. We put a panel together and you brought it to completion for me yesterday. It was a yippee moment.
You want me to go ahead and reveal that?
Because we want people to come. So it's just one thing out of many we have up our sleeve, but go ahead.
Okay, well, we have signed up Michael Fanone
with Denver
Saturday.
Riggleman.
Well,
Denver Riggleman. We are going to do a panel on corruption. It's probably going to be called something like Corruption, Chaos, and Incompetence.
Yes.
And which the Trump administration is fully qualified to handle. And we're going to be pushing back on that with these really super folks. And one more, Catherine, you haven't heard this yet.
Reveal the big reveal. Hold on, let me brush my hair. Hold on.
This close to signing up Harry Dunn.
Harry Dunn, awesome. Yeah, because Harry Dunn is running for Congress, so people come from all different states.
So why don't you introduce, in case people don't know who Denver Riggleman and Fanone are, why don't you just say who they are, just so everybody here understands how special this is?
Yeah, super. You want to do that, Catherine?
I'll say Denver Riggleman's been on our program, but why I met him was he wrote the book, The Breach, that I read and I have, and that was about the January 6th attack, 1776. Funny word. Funny, like, why is that coming up? So then we got him on the show to talk about The Breach, but he was on the January 6th commission, right, with Elaine Luria. And interesting when we want to talk, he has a Substack too, Denver After Dark. But man, oh man, you want to find out that, Ginny Thomas, that Justice Clarence Thomas's wife, is texting Mark Meadows. He has the receipts, and I'll let you talk about Michael.
Yeah, so Michael Fanone and Harry Dunn were two of the police officers. Harry was U.S. Capitol Police, and Michael Fanone was Metropolitan Police DC. They both self-deployed to January 6th just because somebody had to get in there and start fighting back against those, as Michael Fanone calls them, motherfuckers.
I like that.
To keep them out of the Capitol. And so those were two of the guys who were invited to UVA in 22 or 23 to get Defenders of Democracy awards from the University of Virginia. The other two police officers and others were invited to that as well. And to me, they're heroes, and they have just been pushed aside by their industry. And so we want to honor them at the summit.
Yeah.
We do.
And that is
That's
just
fantastic.
one panel, because I can go on all day here, but we need to spread the word. If you're in here and you've bought a ticket, do us this is our Big 10 year, and I'm really proud of the people that I work with. That when I work with, we volunteer. I don't like to call us volunteers because we are actually more than that. We're just
People you couldn't afford,
what you
as
couldn't
Robin would
afford.
say.
No, we're democracy warriors. We're those no, we're not those kind of motherfuckers, but we are the people that fight them. And I think that when we couldn't believe that we'd be here 10 years later, and the persistence that we have has made us effective and impactful across the state in these elections. We will make sure that if you're in the room and you know a grassroots group that you need to have at the summit or recognize, make sure you circulate that form, so we don't want to leave anybody out. Buy a ticket, sponsor. We have people that want to come, and young people especially, they can't, we try to make it affordable. You can see on there, we have student tickets at 20, I think it's 25 or 30 bucks. We have young dem tickets. So, but we also want to make sure we have scholarship. Looking for sponsors. We have our sponsors, some returning, but it's been hard. It's a hard place right now, but this is where money should go, really. And we're going to be training candidates. But let me tell you how many people in 2027 are going to be running, but it's at the local level. So we are going to actually have a full on through Kate Barr at the Can't Win Victory Fund and Slay Strategies. They're going to really put together a Build the Bench program. So if you know a candidate running, connect them with us. Send the Network Nova link to them. Let's make this really the best Big 10 ever. I want the room full. I want us to fight back. We have to win the midterms, our North Star. Let's say thank you and go to the we're going to go to the after chat, but I want to thank our guests here, Jessica Berg, and also Dr. Bonnie Seville and Corey Amron. Thank you for coming. Woman Lawyers on Guard. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So anyway, so what else? Oh, our thank you to our patrons, and make sure you tune in on Sundays at 7. I know it's kind of hard in Substack when it comes up, you go find it, but once it plays, you get on this, you could see us talking, and then you could also watch the recording of it later. And on Facebook and all our social media and our YouTube, we have great assets, great articles. Fennell has been writing phenomenal articles that when she gets pissed, man, she writes really good stuff. So I try to keep her mad a lot. Just like poke her, like, come on, aren't you mad? No, I'm teasing. But she was really an amazing writer. So please subscribe to that. And thank you to the team. And obviously, we will see you at the summit in August. Next week, we have our show. It's going to be a great show. We're going to be talking about healthcare. Tom Perriello will be here. Charles Gaba will be here talking about the ACA. And I want to say that we'll take 2 weeks off to do the summit. So we'll be on a little a break for us to work harder. So just remind people. All right, everybody, let's wrap it up and go to the other side. Thank you.